The text arrived while I was sitting in my father's study, surrounded by his law books. "Let's make this simple, Elena. Your father wanted me to handle everything. You'll be compensated fairly." I stared at Vivian's message, my hands steady on the phone. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had no idea what she'd just walked into. I typed back a single line. "We should talk soon." Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd labeled Dad Final Documents. Every version of his will sat there, time-stamped and notarized. I'd drafted most of them myself. My father had taught me law from the time I could read, bringing me to his office during school breaks, letting me sit in on client meetings. "You have a sharp mind, Elena," he'd always said. "Sharper than anyone in this family." I smiled at the memory, then at Vivian's text. She'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd written that will. 3 years earlier, my father had called me into his office. "I need your help with something important," he'd said, sliding a yellow legal pad across his desk. I was 25 then, fresh out of law school and working at a small firm downtown. He wanted to update his will, and he wanted me to do it. "Why not use your regular attorney?" I'd asked. He'd looked at me with those serious eyes that meant he was about to say something he'd been thinking about for a while. "Because I trust you more than anyone. You know what matters to me. You know what I want protected." We'd spent weeks on it, going over every asset, every property, every detail. He'd been specific about his wishes. The house would go to me, his law practice if I wanted it. His investments would be split, but I'd have controlling interest. Vivian would be taken care of, but she wasn't family. Not really. Not the way he and I were family. The funeral had been 3 days ago. Vivian had played her role perfectly, the grieving widow in her designer black dress, accepting condolences with tear-stained cheeks. I'd watched her from across the cemetery, noting how quickly her tears dried when she thought no one was looking, how she'd whispered to her lawyer, Marcus, during the reception, how she'd taken Dad's keys from his desk that same evening. I'd said nothing, just observed. My father had taught me that too. "Watch people when they think they're not being watched," he'd told me once. "That's when you see who they really are." I'd seen Vivian clearly that day. She was already making plans, already calculating. She thought I was too grief-stricken to notice. She was wrong. I noticed everything. The missing documents from Dad's filing cabinet, the way she'd changed the locks on his office, the nervous energy between her and Marcus. I noticed, and I remembered. 2 days after her text, Vivian invited me to the house for tea. Our house, the one Dad had left to me, though she didn't know that yet. She sat across from me in the living room, pouring Earl Grey like she was hosting a book club. "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But your father would want us to handle this maturely." I sipped my tea and waited. "The thing is, sweetheart, there are adult responsibilities here. Properties to manage, investments to oversee. Your father trusted me with these decisions." I set down my cup carefully. "Dad trusted me with the law, Vivian. He taught me everything he knew." Her smile tightened. "Yes, but this is different. This is real estate, finances, legal matters that require experience." "I have experience," I said quietly. "More than you think." She laughed, a light, dismissive sound. "Elena, honey, I'm trying to make this easy for you." "Don't make it complicated." That night, I sat in my apartment with my laptop open, the flash drive inserted. Dad had given it to me 6 months before he died. "Keep this safe," he'd said. "Everything important is on here. Everything I'd backed it up in 3 places. An encrypted cloud drive, an external hard drive in my safe deposit box, and a copy with my mentor, Judge Morales. Dad hadn't been paranoid. He'd been careful, and he'd taught me to be the same. The drive contained every version of his will, every property deed, every bank statement, every investment document. All digitally signed, all time-stamped, all legally binding. I opened the most recent will, dated 4 months before his death. My name appeared 37 times. Vivian's appeared 4. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of what was coming. She has no idea, I whispered to the empty room. She has absolutely no idea what's coming. Marcus sent the first official letter 3 weeks after the funeral. It arrived by courier, thick and formal. I read it in my office during lunch break, my sandwich forgotten. According to Marcus, I was being removed as primary beneficiary due to concerns about emotional stability and undue influence over the deceased. I read that line 3 times. Emotional instability, undue influence. My father's own daughter, who'd helped him build his practice, who'd spent countless hours learning from him, was apparently unstable. I photographed every page and forwarded the entire letter to the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee. Then I called Judge Morales. They're making their move, I told him. His response was immediate. Good. Let them. You have everything you need. Just let them dig their own hole first. I smiled, remembering Dad's favorite saying, never interrupt your opponent when they're making a mistake. Vivian started moving fast. Within a month, she'd listed 2 of Dad's rental properties for sale. She'd changed the beneficiary on one of his life insurance policies. She'd even tried to access his law firm's trust accounts. I watched it all happen, documenting everything. Every listing, every transaction, every attempt. I'd set up alerts on all of Dad's properties and accounts months ago, back when I'd first noticed Vivian's interest in his finances. The alerts pinged my phone constantly now. Property deed transfer initiated, bank account access attempted, insurance policy modification requested. Each ping was another piece of evidence, another nail in her coffin. My colleague asked why I seemed so calm. My stepmother's trying to steal my inheritance, I said. She looked shocked. Shouldn't you be freaking out? I just smiled. She can't steal what's already protected. She just doesn't know it yet. The dinner party was Vivian's idea. She invited 12 of Dad's old friends and colleagues, hosting it at the house like she owned it. Technically, she was living there under the terms of Dad's will, which provided for her residence until the estate was settled. She just didn't know how that settlement would go. I arrived on time, dressed simply, carrying a bottle of wine. Vivian greeted me at the door with a hug that felt like a performance. Inside, she was holding court, talking about her plans for managing the estate. Poor Elena, she said to a group by the fireplace, loud enough for me to hear. She's taking it so hard. I keep telling her she'll be fine. She'll probably rent a nice little apartment somewhere. I stood nearby, sipping my wine, my phone recording every word in my pocket. One of Dad's old partners caught my eye across the room. He raised his glass slightly, a knowing look on his face. He knew. They all knew who'd really run things. Marcus filed for an emergency probate hearing 6 weeks after the funeral. The petition claimed that Dad's original will was potentially influenced by undue pressure from his daughter during a period of cognitive decline. I read the filing in disbelief. Cognitive decline. My father, who'd practiced law until 2 weeks before his death, who'd won a major case at 73, who'd had the sharpest mind of anyone I'd ever known. I called Dr. Patterson, Dad's physician. Did my father show any signs of cognitive decline in his final year? There was a long pause. Elena, your father was sharper than I am, and I'm 20 years younger. I'd stake my medical license on his mental competency. Would you be willing to testify to that? Absolutely. I added his name to my witness list. The list was getting long now, very long. Each name represented someone who knew the truth about my father, about Vivian, about how this would really end. Judge Morales met me at a coffee shop downtown. He'd been my mentor during law school and Dad's friend for 40 years. You ready for this? He asked, stirring his coffee. I showed him my phone, the folder labeled Evidence. Inside were 6 months of documentation. Vivian's texts bragging about her plans, Marcus's questionable legal filings, the altered documents, the attempted fraud, the witness statements. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. "You learned well. He taught me to fight smart, not dirty. Smart is better. Smart wins." He slid a business card across the table. "This is my colleague in probate court. She's aware of the situation, not prejudging, just aware I pocketed the card." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks away. Vivian thought she was walking into a formality. She was walking into an ambush, and she'd set every trap herself. I spent the weekend before the hearing at Dad's house. Vivian was out of town conveniently. I had my key, the one Dad had given me years ago, the one Vivian didn't know about. I went straight to his study and checked the computer. As I suspected, files had been deleted. The original will documents gone. The property records gone. The trust agreements gone. She'd tried to erase everything. I sat in Dad's chair and opened my laptop, pulling up the backup files from my cloud storage. Every document she'd deleted was right there, perfectly preserved. I'd set up the system myself 2 years ago when Dad's computer kept having technical issues that coincidentally happened whenever Vivian was home alone. "She forgot who secured the network," I said aloud, imagining Dad's smile. I downloaded everything to a new flash drive, created new backups, and added the deletion timestamps to my evidence folder. Digital tampering, evidence destruction. This just kept getting better. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5. I didn't sleep well, but it wasn't nerves. It was anticipation. I dressed in a simple navy suit, Dad's law school pin on my lapel. I packed one leather folder containing hard copies of everything. At the courthouse, Vivian arrived with Marcus, both dressed like they were attending a gala. She wore Chanel and diamonds. Marcus carried 3 briefcases. I carried 1 folder. They saw me and Marcus actually smirked. "Elena, sweetheart," Vivian said, her voice sugary. "It's not too late to settle this privately. We can work something out." "I think we should let the judge decide," I replied. "After all, that's why we're here." Marcus leaned in. "You sure you're ready for this?" "You're pretty young to go up against experienced counsel," I met his eyes steadily. "I learned from the best attorney in this city." "I'm ready." The bailiff called us in. As we walked through the doors, I felt Dad beside me, the way I always did in courtrooms. "Watch and learn," he'd always said. Today, Vivian and Marcus would do the watching. Judge Anderson was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and no patience for games. Marcus presented his case first, arguing that Dad had been influenced in his later years, that I'd manipulated him into favoring me unfairly. He painted me as a scheming daughter who'd isolated Dad from Vivian. "The original will, Your Honor, clearly shows an imbalance that suggests undue influence." He slid his version across the bench. Judge Anderson examined it. "Ms. Park, do you have a response?" I stood. "Your Honor, I have the original will here, certified, notarized, and witnessed by 2 independent attorneys. I provided the document. You'll notice it's dated 4 months before my father's passing. He was of sound mind, as his physician will testify. He was not isolated from anyone. He was specific about his wishes." Marcus interrupted. "That document could have been forged." "It could have been," I agreed. "Except it matches the copies held by the law firm of Brooks & Associates, my father's trust attorney and Judge Morales, retired from this very courthouse. All copies are identical. All are certified." The room went quiet. Marcus flipped through his papers, clearly searching for a response. Judge Anderson looked at Vivian. "Mrs. Park, were you aware of these certified copies?" Vivian's composure cracked slightly. Marcus told me we had the real will." "The real will," Judge Anderson repeated. "Ms. Park, Do you have anything else? I do, Your Honor. I open my folder. I have digital timestamps showing when documents were accessed and deleted from my father's home computer after his death. The access came from Mrs. Vivian Park's user account. I provided the printouts. I also have text messages from Mrs. Park discussing her plans to restructure my father's assets before the estate was settled. Marcus shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is ambush tactics. We weren't provided discovery on. Because you didn't file for discovery, Judge Anderson cut him off. You filed for emergency hearing. Ms. Park is simply responding to your claims. Continue, Ms. Park, I continued. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything, every deleted file, every altered document, every attempt to access accounts she had no legal right to touch. Vivian's face went from confident to pale to red. This is ridiculous, she finally burst out. That house is my home. Those assets are my security. Her father would have wanted me taken care of. My father did take care of you, I said quietly. In his will, you're provided a generous monthly stipend, the use of the guest house on the property, and full medical coverage for life. But the main house, the law practice, and the investment accounts were never meant to be yours. How would you know what he wanted? Because I wrote the will, Vivian. My father asked me to draft it because he trusted my legal expertise. We went over every clause together. You were provided for. You just weren't given everything. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. You wrote it? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. Every word. And I backed up every version, every signature, every change. There's no loophole here. No error. Just your attempt to take what was never yours. Judge Anderson called a brief recess. In the hallway, Marcus pulled Vivian aside. Their whispered argument carried across the marble floors. I sat on a bench, breathing slowly, keeping my composure. Dad's old partner, Mr. Brooks, appeared beside me. Your father told me you'd be ready if something like this happened. I didn't believe him. I thought he was being paranoid. He shook his head. But he knew. He knew exactly who he'd married. He wanted her to be comfortable, I said. He just didn't want her to destroy what we'd built together. You sound just like him. The bailiff called us back in. When we reconvened, Marcus made a motion to withdraw as Vivian's counsel. Your Honor, given new information that's come to light, I feel there may be a conflict of interest in my continuing representation. Convenient timing, Judge Anderson said dryly. Motion granted. Mrs. Park, you'll need to retain new counsel if you wish to continue contesting this will. Vivian just sat there, stunned, as her lawyer walked out. Judge Anderson reviewed the evidence for what felt like an hour. Finally, she looked up. This is one of the clearest cases of attempted will tampering I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Mrs. Vivian Park, not only are your claims dismissed, but I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Vivian gasped. Criminal charges? Evidence destruction, attempted fraud, computer tampering. Yes, criminal charges. Judge Anderson turned to me. Ms. Park, your father's will is hereby validated as originally written. You are confirmed as primary beneficiary and executor of the estate. Mrs. Vivian Park will retain the provisions designated for her in the original will, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Furthermore, Mrs. Park, you have 30 days to vacate the main residence and remove your personal belongings. The guest house will be available to you as specified in the will. Vivian looked at me, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. You planned this. All of it. I met her eyes across the courtroom. No, Vivian. You planned this. I just made sure you couldn't succeed. My voice was steady, calm. My father taught me that the law isn't about tricks or loopholes. It's about preparation and truth. You forgot that he taught me everything he knew. I gave him 3 years of my life, she said bitterly. He gave me 25 years, I replied. And in those years, he taught me how to protect what matters. You tried to erase me from his legacy. Instead, you erased yourself. Judge Anderson's gavel came down. This matter is concluded. Ms. Park, you'll work with the court to complete probate proceedings. Mrs. Park, you're dismissed. As everyone filed out, I remained seated for a moment, looking at Dad's law school pin on my lapel. We did it, Dad, I whispered, just like you taught me. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright. I had calls to make, paperwork to file, an entire estate to settle properly. But first, I just stood there, breathing, feeling the weight of the last 3 months finally lifting. The news spread through Dad's legal circles within hours. By evening, my phone was flooded with calls and texts, colleagues congratulating me, former clients of Dad's expressing relief, even a few reporters asking for comments. I ignored most of them, but I did answer when Mr. Brooks called. Your father would have handled it exactly the same way, he said. Quiet, prepared, letting the opposition hang themselves. He always said the best defense is a perfect defense. He also said you were the smartest person he'd ever taught. I see why now. That night, I drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been back since the funeral, couldn't face it until this was over. Now, standing at Dad's grave, I could finally breathe. It's done, I said aloud. The house is protected. Your practice is protected. Everything you built is safe. The evening breeze rustled through the trees. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice. I knew you could do it. I always knew. I placed fresh flowers on his grave and headed home. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Vivian tried to reach out 3 days after the hearing. Multiple calls, several texts, even an email through her new attorney. All saying the same thing. She wanted to talk, to explain, to negotiate. I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to negotiate. The will was validated. The estate was being settled. Her attempt to steal my inheritance had failed, and now she was facing potential criminal charges. I focused on the work instead. Dad's law practice needed attention. Clients needed reassurance. Cases needed reviewing. I'd taken a leave from my firm to handle everything, and they'd been incredibly understanding. Take all the time you need, my boss had said. Family comes first. The practice was smaller than I'd remembered, but solid. Dad had been semi-retired, keeping only his most loyal clients. Many of them had known me since I was a child. Your father was so proud of you, Mrs. Chen told me during a consultation. He talked about you constantly. How smart you were, how you'd be even better than him someday. 1 month after the court hearing, I received a letter from the district attorney's office. They were moving forward with charges against Vivian, evidence tampering, attempted fraud, and computer crimes. The evidence I'd provided had been exceptionally thorough, they said. I felt no satisfaction in that, no joy, just a quiet sense that justice was working as it should. Vivian had tried to cheat, and the system was holding her accountable. That's how Dad would have wanted it. I spent that evening in his study, now officially my study, going through his old case files. He'd kept meticulous notes on everything, just as he'd taught me to do. In one file, I found a letter he'd written but never sent. It was dated 2 months before he died, addressed to me. Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're handling things without me. I'm so proud of the lawyer you've become. More importantly, I'm proud of the person you are. Remember, the law is just words until someone gives it meaning. You give it meaning. Love, Dad. Vivian's trial was scheduled for 6 months later. I wouldn't have to testify unless called, but I planned to attend. Not for revenge or satisfaction, but to see the process through, to honor what Dad had taught me about facing things head on. In the meantime, I made a decision. Dad's old office, the one connected to the main house, was sitting empty. The practice was quiet, just a few cases still in progress. It seemed wasteful to let it all go. I filed paperwork to establish the Park Legal Trust, a nonprofit offering free legal help to families dealing with inheritance disputes, elder law issues, and estate planning, especially for people who couldn't afford attorneys, who might be taken advantage of by family members or lawyers who saw opportunity in their grief. The first client was an elderly woman whose son-in-law was trying to force her to sign over her house. It took me 2 weeks, but I protected her assets and got him removed from her affairs. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I held a small ceremony at the office. Just close friends and colleagues, a quiet moment to remember him. The office looked different now. I'd renovated it, keeping his old desk but updating everything else. Photos of him lined one wall, including my favorite. Dad at his law school graduation, young and hopeful, and ready to change the world. "He did change the world," Mr. Brooks said, standing beside me. "One case at a time, one client at a time." "That's what I want to do," I said. "Keep changing it." The way he taught me, "You already are, Elena." The trust has helped 15 families in 6 months. That's 15 legacies protected, 15 people who won't be erased from their own stories. I thought about Vivian, waiting for trial in her sister's spare bedroom. She'd lost everything, the house, the money, her reputation, her freedom, all because she'd tried to take what wasn't hers. "She tried to erase me from Dad's story," I said quietly. "Instead, she wrote herself out of it." The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the back row, watching justice unfold with the same patience Dad had taught me. Vivian's defense was weak. How could it be strong when the evidence was so overwhelming? The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing would come later, but the verdict was clear. Vivian had tried to cheat, and she'd been caught. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to get a statement. I gave them one sentence. My father believed in the law, and today the law worked exactly as it should. That night, I sat in Dad's study with a glass of his favorite scotch. I'd never developed a taste for it, but tonight seemed appropriate, a toast to endings and beginnings, to justice and family, to everything he'd taught me. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted security, Vivian. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations weren't worth having. 5 years later, the Park Legal Trust had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. 3 full-time attorneys, 2 paralegals, and a caseload that kept us constantly busy. We'd protected over 200 families from inheritance fraud, helped countless elderly clients secure their estates, and trained law students in elder law and estate planning. The office walls were covered with thank you cards and photos. Everyone represented someone who'd been protected, someone whose story hadn't been erased. Dad's legacy had multiplied, growing into something even better than what he'd built alone. I still practiced law the way he'd taught me, carefully, thoroughly, with respect for the truth and patience for the process. I still kept his law school pin on my lapel, and I still visited his grave every week, updating him on the cases, the trust, the lives we'd changed. Vivian had served 18 months and been released on probation. I'd heard she'd moved to another state, started over with a different name. Good. Everyone deserved a second chance, even people who'd tried to steal my inheritance. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, building something better, honoring what Dad had taught me. I stood in the office one evening, looking at his portrait on the wall. "She tried to erase me from your story, Dad," I whispered. "Instead, I became the author of what comes next." The evening sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Outside, the city moved forward, full of people with stories, with legacies, with families to protect. And I was ready. I'd always be ready. Because the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's building something so good, so strong, so meaningful, that the person who tried to destroy you becomes irrelevant. They tried to erase me from the story. I became the author instead.